Okay, welcome to the CMS Elements Demo. Okay, so what I've done here is I've taken a simple single-page application and I've used Angular Elements to project some content onto a child component. Okay, so let me back up and just show you what I've done. Okay, so this here is the root element, this grayish blue area, and basically what I did was I created an Angular 6 project. And I'm testing out Angular elements working within an Angular project. So basically what I did was I put a child component selector tag in the root component template. And then I used an ng content element to project some content from the child enclosing selector so I could project that onto the ng content element. And so basically what I'm doing is I have the root component with a selector and the child component, and I'm taking some content and projecting it onto the child component. Okay, so basically, first let me show you what I'm talking about here. So the bottom line is I have this light sky blue Angular custom element, and it has some dynamic content. See, I could add dog to animal, and so I get some property binding here, and I got this Angular context inside this element, this sky blue element. But the content that's being managed is this gold area. So they might see the selector in here, the folks who are editing the content, but they don't have to know what that element does as far as it doing something functionally. So this is what Google does with their documentation to some extent. And trust me, I'm not an expert in the content management world with what Google's doing. I just wanted to see how a custom element in Angular 6 works and how I can use projection to provide some Angular functionality within a component of some content which is being injected into an ng content area. Okay, so let's take a look at the code and you might clearly understand, and just so you know, I'm just going to do another animal here to show you what it looks like. Okay, so I have a little form here, I have some dynamic binding, I have change detection, etc. Okay, let's take a look at the code. Okay, so basically I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. Okay, so I have an Angular module, and I'm just reformatting my code. And I created this project using Angular 6. If you want to see what that looks like, it is up here. I'm using Angular 6 and Node 8. So I see all the version of the TypeScript and the Webpack and stuff that I am using. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, I am transpiling down here. I got the ng serve running. So I just wanted to show you that real quick. Now, what I've done is I have imported some things here. I have a root component, a child component. I'm using the create custom element to create a custom element, and I have a snip component, which really is my custom element. Okay, so what I do is I declare those custom elements, and basically I have to list the snip component as an entry component, and this is what you have to do with a custom element. And basically in my constructor I create custom element, the ship component, and I configure the injector as well. And then I do a custom element and I define and I use the app snippet selector. Okay, so this is like standard code. that you would write to create a custom element in Angular using Angular elements. Okay, so now basically what I'm trying to do is just show you what and why. Okay, so basically if you look at my app component, let's look at the app component first. All I'm doing is putting a title here saying CMS element. In my template I say, okay, welcome to CMS Element Demo. So I bind that using the interpolation directive, and then basically what I do is I have an app child with some content, and this is what you interpret as the content that's being managed by someone who's not technical, let's say who doesn't know Angular, and they just see this app child and they see this app snippet. I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, and the bottom line is this content we're changing, etc. And so I could change this content, but this app snip is just a snippet of code. The content manager doesn't care what it is. It's providing functionality. In the case of Google, basically it provides the capability of cutting and pasting some code snippets or whatever. In my case, I'm just doing a little form and doing some dynamic binding, and it's no big deal. Okay, so whatever's in this child is really the content, or you could even include the app child tag if you want to. And so let's look at the child element. The child element really doesn't do much. It has a template and an app child selector. And so notice in here. Let me just back up a minute. I have the app root tag and the index.html, and here I have the app child tag, and the app child tag inside of it has the app snippet tag, and here in the child component I have an ng content, which I could name if I want to, but I'm not really naming. So this template for the child says this is the child component. We will project content below. Okay, so going back to this is the child component. We will project content below. This is the content. Okay, and so the bottom line is the content is coming from here, and I'm projecting it into the child here. So projection is it's an interesting concept. When I first saw it, I wasn't that thrilled about it, but now that I understand that there's this dynamic capability inside the content management, so you got this best of both worlds. You got static content, which allows you to use custom elements inside of it, which actually allow you to do dynamic stuff. And so this custom element is going to have its own property binding and change detection, etc. Okay, so now let's take a look at the snippet. Okay, what I do in the snippet is I have this content string, and I have a constructor empty, and I have an ng on init where I set the initial content, animal list. And I also have a function called add animal. And when I add the animal string, I basically add it to the content. So I say this.content plus equals the string, and then I put a little space there. You know, I could put a comma there, but it probably wouldn't look good. But and then what I do is I create a little form on my page, and I have this is a template-driven form. we use this ng form, we export it as F, and I have an input named animal, and I put this ng module which says, okay, this is part of my model. My ng form has attributes, and that's one of them. And I have to name it because now when I click this button, I'm going to add the exported form dot value dot animal. Okay, so this value is really the JSON data corresponding to the form. The dot animal is really the input attribute, which is part of that form. So, and then my button says add animal. And then when I set that property binding and change detection, basically this interpolation directive binds the content data to the front end. So of course there's this changing a property and reevaluating the template that goes on behind the scenes. But this content is going to change when I click the button. Now notice in my styles, okay, if you look at my data, you know, I got the root component has a background color, the child component has background color, the projected content has background color, and my custom element has background color. And I do that so we could see really what's going on. And now if this was a single colored page, what you'd basically see is just a content which could be managed, and at the same time you would see that you would see that functionality working in the custom element. Okay, but let's just quickly just review what we're doing here as far as styles. Okay, this has I'm displaying this block style, and don't take this for, I mean, I've done better styles. I did this very quick, and sometimes I brute force make things happen. But the bottom line is this is the Cadet blue background. This child component is the hot pink background. The ship component, I put this green background, but it's really not showing because basically up here I have this projected content, and I put it with an orange background. So it's covering that, and so there's nothing really here that I need, not unless I do something with. I'm not going to mess with this. Okay, so basically I've colored it that way, and I was trying to align this centered, and I was having some issues, but then I realized that it's really better if I put it this way, left justified, because it shows you more clearly what the projected content is. It's the gold, it's the orange area. Okay, so this is my attempt to teach custom elements from a content management point of view, and try to understand what Google is doing and why with custom elements right now with the documentation site. Now the bad news with this, and I'll show you this, is that if you basically let me see if I could do this again. If you go to Google's site and look at the documentation, what you'll find is they're using Angular elements, and not every browser supports it. Okay, so if we go to IE, let's see what happens here. What'll happen is you'll realize that IE is not supporting custom elements properly yet. So just keep in mind, you got to be careful when you use this in other browsers. We could try it in other browsers, but I wouldn't. Don't waste your time. The bottom line is, if you go to the Google documentation and don't, and they might have changed this, but when you go to Google Docs, it doesn't really work in IE because they're using Angular Elements, and I have to switch to Google browser. So supposedly Safari, Google, and I don't think Firefox supported this in my browser. It doesn't in my version of Firefox, but you can try whatever you like. So the point is, I just wanted to see how this works. I have a couple of Angular Elements demos and videos out there. One of them puts the custom element outside the single page application. So you could have a single page application and have some custom element, kind of like a dashboard elements outside of the single page application. That works now with Angular Elements. And that might be valuable because when it gets more mature, new versions of Angular, browser updates, you might be able to use these in other applications. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to show for the demo. Is really just show you the CMS elements, and like I said, go to AngularOrange.io. You could see another demo on the home page. Presently it's at the home page. It shows you how to put an Angular custom element outside a single page application, and loosely speaking, what we're talking about is getting a little markup fragment with dynamic binding and the data binding and your mini infrastructure in Angular to give it the functionality it needs while it's inside an Angular single page application or outside. And the potential is to have it like to use a React application and use a custom Angular element, or any JavaScript framework, and use custom elements. And also, one more thing I'm going to point out is Ionic 4. Go look at it. It is a suite of custom elements which have all this built-in features and functionality associated with it. Right out of the box, you get this custom element which is based on SAS and works on different devices with different look and feels.